Saul and Battery, hosted by Mel and Kelly.
And Mike.
Forget what you know. Forget what you know. Saul and Battery.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Saul and Battery, where we talk about the latest episode of Better Call Saul. I'm Kelly Toole at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
And I am Mike at Official Pagan on just about everything.
Excuse me. And this week we are here to talk about episode 6, which was called Off Brand. And for us to remain on brand, we didn't start precisely at 9 o'clock. You may have noticed that we kind of worked through some things and issues, but we're good now. And
I feel like this is mostly my fault, so I apologize to the batterers. What would we call me?
I don't know. That's a great question. The batterer sounds pretty good to me, but maybe this particular episode for us, that you may have contributed a little bit to our later start. I've done my good work earlier this year to kind of run us right up to the wire. So the description on YouTube says starts 9 o'clock ish Central Time, and so I think we stay true to that. So
yeah, that is accurate, if nothing else.
Yeah, we're close. We're close on that. So. Just if you're a first-time listener or need a reminder, our basic structure is we will talk just really briefly about some top-line reactions to the show. You'll then be treated to a 30-second recap of the episode. Mike is up this week for that. And then we'll just kind of step through the entire episode a little bit more, talk about our favorite parts, talk about what our favorite quotes were. We will also do some estimating on the potential lifespan of a couple key characters, and we'll call it a day. So, top-line reaction to Off-Brand, Mike.
Loved it. I was expecting a more Mike-heavy episode than we got, so I was a little bit disappointed when it seemed like he wasn't going to be as involved, but otherwise, this episode really, really delivered for the Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul fans.
Yeah, the parade of cameos continues in very cool ways, and you start to see dots being connected in terms of Mr. Fring's operation, and some of his connects was pretty cool. And then a pretty strong special moment at the end that we will be sure to talk about when we get there. So fun overall.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yep, I think you do. So, my friend, are you ready?
I am. Let's see if I can pull this off.
Okay, you got a pretty good track record here, so hang on a sec.
It's only because I so embarrassed myself when we first started doing the 1-minute recaps.
Yeah, I'm pleased with our progress towards now the 32nd. So, okay, I will start the timer when you begin to speak. Feel free.
All right. Nacho is heavy-handed but light on the small talk. Rebecca rains on Kimmy's parade. Mike is reluctant to share. Howard lifts Chuck's spirits. Chuck lifts a battery. Jimmy makes a commercial. Nacho uses Hector math. Chuck takes his space skirt out on the town, and we meet an old friend for the first time. Done.
Wow. So I was a little slow on the start there, but you're still about a solid 15-second mark on that one. So that was pretty good.
I got tripped up a little bit there, but I pulled it out.
Yeah, and you hit a lot. You hit a lot of the key things, especially the old friend.
Yes, which I had a sneaking suspicion is what you were referring to.
Very much so. For a show called Better Call Saul, it was kind of nice to see that guy at the very end.
Yeah, and what was cool too is for a show that because I said in the beginning how much this episode delivered, they all deliver. There really hasn't been a bad episode. I think we both love this show. We do this show about the show. So obviously we both love this show. But I think for the Saul fans and for the Breaking Bad fans, they got something this week that we've been waiting for all this time.
Yeah, it's been a slow burn towards it, but it came, and it was spectacular and awesome and everything we wanted. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. But feel free, of course, as always, Mike, to shout out your quote of the show. When we get to that section, I will do the same. And we start off with the opening segment where Hector, who rivals Chuck for being an unpleasant person, sitting in his shop, and Nacho is totally channeling Tuco, being Tuco light, as he's collecting money from folks. And our good friend Crazy 8 shows up. He's trying to be chatty and small talk, and he's a little light this week. And Nacho kind of lets it slide. Hector gives him some crap, and Crazy 8 gets a bit of a beatdown.
Yeah, and what I thought was really interesting about this whole scene, too, is it made a great juxtaposition with, you saw the inner workings of Hector's, front business versus how Gus runs his front business, which is an actual operating business that the other people are unaware of Gus's actual motivations. Whereas like these collections are happening right in the middle of this restaurant or whatever it is. There is no employees. There is no customers.
No, yeah, it night and day in terms of approaches, and a bit of a callback to they're continuing to roll their money up with rubber bands. So I guess Hector's not going to be following the Don Eladio, I want my money wrapped in a Bed Bath & Beyond money wrapper device or whatever. But
well, I was wondering, and maybe this is something that we're going to see play out later, I was wondering if they were collecting it that way just to like present it to Gus to put together for them.
That could make sense. Yeah, because Hector's got a lot of attitude about this, so I could totally see that.
Like he's trying to make Gus, work for him. So that seemed like something he would see as, making him do it for him and being demeaning to Gus.
Yeah, makes that. I buy that. I totally buy that. Either that or he doesn't give a crap.
Yeah, that or he just really doesn't care.
So then we move into Act 1, where Kim is summing up, doing the typical awesome Kim job, kind of touching all the bases on how awesome Jimmy is regarding his elder law operation. It looked like a bunch of his clients had been there to speak for him, talked about his care for Chuck. So that's getting wrapped up. We cut back over to Chuck. He's in full meltdown mode. Rebecca's there trying to get in, and he's not having any of it. Rebecca heads over to Jimmy's and Kim, where they're kind of celebrating and wants some help. And Jimmy's like, I don't owe him squat. He's not my brother anymore. And then Rebecca says, my quote of the episode, he's mentally ill. What's your excuse? So I thought that was an awful good quote. And I thought possibly could be a subtitle for our podcast.
Another great thing that I thought about this particular sequence is we definitely saw Jimmy as Saul in this exchange with Rebecca, where she's like, oh, you have to go there, and he's just nope and brushing it off. Like that was definitely more Saul than it was Jimmy to me.
Yeah, this is because no matter what happens at the end, most of the time Jimmy comes around to showing he's got a good intention, but that's not so much the case here, where he's kind of this is a Saul Goodman answer. Nope,
yeah, absolutely.
So we move into Act 2, where we've got Stacy in a therapy session. Kind of surprised to see Mike there with her, and she's lining Mike up for playground help, which kind of scares me a little bit because I don't know what Mike would be doing for playground help. I mean, she talks about footings and all that, but I see Mike teaching the kids here's how you can create a spike strip with a hose, and here's how you can shoot a gun through a wall.
I just thought it was funny that we kind of saw Mike as the handyman in the last episode, and now they're setting up he's going to be working on this playground. So it's weird, like the Mike Bob Vila home improvement sort of.
It would be a very stern show. I think if he was just like, this is how you do it, and if you don't do it this way, I'm going to smack you in the face. But yeah, and so it's still nice to see the whole Mike Stacy relationship and all that.
I think I would watch that show, though, stern or not. Like, I would rather watch that than I think any of the actual home improvement shows that exist.
Yeah, I think so. I could see Mike saying, "Oh, it looks like they overcharged me for this lumber. I'll be right back." And then you just
hear screaming off camera.
Yep, that'd be a good show. That'd be a great show.
I think we just planned the next spinoff for them.
Yeah, I think so. Although I still think the copier store guy and Gus's right hand manager, them doing something together would be super fun too.
Oh, absolutely.
Assuming they're both alive by the end of this.
They just really need to like get with us and let us plan out the next steps of this universe.
Yeah, because they clearly need some help, and we're the folks that need to tap into to kind of give them that creative direction. I think that's a good point.
Right. They're Vince Gilligan sitting there right now, and he's like, what would Kelly and Mike do?
We're getting tired of him copying some of our best ideas too. But he's just cherry picking and aping this kind of brilliant stuff that we come up with, and then he stumbles out this stuff that's kind of a pale comparison to the ideas we have.
I mean, he's doing okay. It's just not
passable.
What we would do.
It's cute.
It's cute.
Pat him on the head. So our good friend Howard visits Chuck, who Chuck's still not answering, but Howard's a little more persistent than Rebecca. And
now, do you think it was because Howard was more persistent than Rebecca, or was Chuck a little more willing to hear out Howard than he was Rebecca?
I think it would have taken a lot for Chuck to face Rebecca. I think that's a really fair point. I mean, it wasn't just simply persistence, because I think it sounded like Rebecca was there for an hour pounding. But Howard, I think, declared said, "I'm not going anywhere, so I'm going to be out here." But I also think you had a fair point that I don't think he's ever opening the door for Rebecca because of the embarrassment, where this is not new territory for Howard. So eventually he got over it. So that's a good point.
Yeah, I think he's humiliated in front of Rebecca, whereas Howard, even now, even though Howard is, compared to what we've seen in his dedication to Chuck, a little bit more shaky after the hearing, he still kind of looks up to Chuck.
Yeah, I think it's this mixed bag. I think he does. And then he's also seeing there's elements of Chuck as he exists today that are not in his firm's best interest, and there's a conflict there. So
yeah, I'm going to be honest. I thought the scene was going to go a little bit differently than it did. Like, I knew he would try and lift his spirits, that he would try and repurpose the 12-month suspension as a win on their part. I knew that was coming, but I also thought he was going to lean more on the side of, like, maybe it's time for you to slow down now instead of trying to get him up on his feet.
Yeah, get him on his feet, steer him away from going after Jimmy, saying that'll take care of itself, very likely. Yeah, so so I'm with you too, because as it started off, and Patrick Fabian, who plays Howard, does, I mean, it's an incredibly well written character, and incredibly well performed. But I didn't know I was with you as this conversation started. I was kind of expecting Howard to kind of slime ball it a little bit, or that, and he's going to try and use it to edge Chuck out. But I felt there was a lot of genuine. A couple things genuine coming from him. One, I think he was looking to try and say, let's just cap this Jimmy stuff off because it's not helping anybody.
Right. This is going to take you down a path you're never going to come back from.
And to steer him in a good direction. So I think Darth Vader, as Jimmy referred to him in early episodes, is actually a pretty stand-up guy.
I think he is just being loyal to Chuck, which isn't always the right decision. Like, I don't think Howard's a bad guy. I think his loyalties are misplaced, and that he's looking out for what he sees as best for his firm. Not that that's a bad thing.
And it was a little hard to tell as things wrapped up whether, of course, Chuck's to new beginnings, and it seems like he's saying all the things like, "Oh, you've got a point," that he's going down the road. Then Howard leaves, and Chuck goes out and pops out the tape recorder, grabs one of the batteries out of it, and grabs a hold of it, and is apparently trying to kind of work through this issue he has with electricity. So there's two ways this could go. He's either doing it in a process of trying to start to get better, or he's doing it in a process to get better so he can figure out another way to go after Jimmy. Do you have a leaning one way or another? What's the core motivation for Chuck? Just to get better, or to get better to get Jimmy?
I think Jimmy is something that's always going to nag at the Chuck character. Like, I don't think he can drop it. Even if he wants to, I just don't think he's capable of it.
Yeah, they're both. We've learned now that they're both pretty crafty, but ultimately, I'll put my money on Jimmy long term, because Howard's hubris will at some point catch him up. Oh, he's a really bright guy. We then cut back over to Jimmy and Kim's place, where Jimmy is making a lot of calls to many confused clients that he needs to kind of take a year off, because some letters are going to them explaining that he's going to be taking a year off. And we finally see, there's lots of neat little callbacks through this episode. They'll start to pick up now. There's the first one. If you recall Francesca from Breaking Bad, we were introduced to her, and basically anytime we saw her, her spirit was broken. She was not happy to be in Saul Goodman's lobby, but she was always reading a magazine. And we see in this particular episode, as she's always been so far in the show, bright and chipper and wanting to help out. And here they're cranking through all this big long list of clients to call. She kind of looks over and sees a magazine. Looks kind of interesting. So she pulls it over and starts flipping through it. So I think we begin to see the start of Francesca utilizing magazines to help pass her time working for Jimmy/Saul.
Yeah, it's definitely, you saw a little bit more of the Francesca that we know. Also, I do like how Jimmy stuck up for her when Kim was, very reasonably talking about letting her go, assuming Jimmy wasn't going to keep his half of the practice open.
Yeah, and love the Kim character, and these are perfectly pragmatic decisions, but the calls are followed up with her visiting with Jimmy around, we probably need to let Francesca go. We probably need to get rid of this office and go to a smaller one. All things that are perfectly legitimate if you've cut your income in half to that entity. But Jimmy's like, no, I like Francesca. I want to keep her around. And he says he'll continue to pay his half, and we'll talk about it when he can't.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting thing. So did you ever see the movie Ed Wood?
Yes.
Okay, so the Tim Burton film, the Tim Burton biopic about the director Ed Wood. I remember seeing an interview around the making of the film, and they said that one of the hard parts in writing it and casting it and everything was to make the bad guys, the people who are trying to stand in his way, were actually people who are being completely reasonable about their requests and their expectations, but to make them sort of the bad guy of the scene, but not in a way that vilifies them, because again, they're being reasonable. So I felt like they struck a great chord with Kim's character here in doing the same thing, where Jimmy's like, no, we can't get rid of Francesca. I like her. We shouldn't have to downsize our office, but she's being completely reasonable, as you said.
Right. It was super interesting on Twitter during that phrase. Kim, who has, traditionally across Twitter during the shows, lots of Kim love. People are big fans of hers. There was this sudden outburst when she started to go down this road about, screw Kim, get rid of her, keep Francesca. And it was like, wow, I was surprised the allegiance to Francesca is far more strong than I thought.
Well, and I think that's a great, they struck that same balance that they did in the movie Ed Wood, where the person who's being completely logical and reasonable is somehow the villain in a situation for simply being logical and reasonable.
Yeah, doing the thing that just makes sense, no doubt. But we do have a communication from Tim from Bloomington again. He's got a little more input from us. Tim believes that Chuck should die a painful death.
That might happen.
we can hope.
I mean, there was no Chuck in the Breaking Bad world.
I'm hoping for a painful and humiliating death.
I mean, autoerotic asphyxiation seems like it's outside of the character's purview.
Space blanket asphyxiation.
There you go.
It looked like a big Jiffy Pop bag going in and out. So that could be maybe Michael sneak in one night and wrap a space blanket around his head. We can always hope. So we go into Act 3, and Jimmy, who's kind of stuck right now because he realized in this process of getting everything shut down that he still had commercial time, and his ads for Jimmy McGill, Lawyer You Can Trust, were still running. And the way the contract's set up, he can't quite get out of it. He can't sell the time, but he might be able to kind of run another commercial in its place. So he's basically trying to get filler commercials to plug into where his commercials would have run. He needs to do it in a hurry, like in the next 15 minutes. He talks to these nice people who run a furniture place. He's kind of rushing them. That kind of stalls out. And then they're working on it, and he comes up with an idea. We don't know quite what it is yet. They come to a big kind of array of antennas he's with, and I've got to I love this show because of the kind of unique characters they've added in this one. So the Kettlemans from season 1, love the Kettlemans.
Of course.
They were incredibly awesome. Also introduced, I believe, in the first season was the film crew.
Yes.
And they're back. The goofy girl, the big tall doofus, and the emo director guy. And it was so wonderful to see them again, and they are still as incredibly useless as possible. Jimmy's quizzing each of them to say this line, and it becomes remarkably clear that they're useless. And so he finishes off with, and this is funny that you mentioned Ed Wood earlier, because Jimmy kind of ends this, he's trying to get somebody. He knows, I'm Jimmy McGill, the lawyer you can trust. It can't be me. And so that'd be off brand. So he's trying to get his film crew. They're not going to work. And he goes, all right, we're going to have to Karloff this thing. So, of course, we had, while it was Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood, that idea of kind of a bluff fake person type of thing. So I thought it was pretty cool. But it's so great to see the film crew again.
Yeah, and that was actually where my favorite line comes in, when he's trying to get them each to read the line that he wants. And when he looks at the emo director and just says, woof.
Yeah. Scenes with that group is just, it's magic. It was
great. And you know what was great too, because when this whole exchange was happening and he was saying how he needed someone else because this was off brand, I was like, is this it? Is this how we get introduced to the character formally? But then when there's some other stuff that happened after this and you don't see it, I was like, no, that's not going to be it.
No, they did a good job in kind of getting your hopes up, but then you're not so sure. So again, it was well paced and
yeah.
Another spin-off show I would watch is this film crew, the adventures of this film crew.
They could do an entire show of them doing bad local commercials.
I'd watch it. I'd watch it repeatedly.
Oh yeah, in fact that would be perfect for a web series. Show each bad commercial and their little making of it.
They totally should be putting those on there, because they're doing a really cool thing on the AMC site where they're doing kind of the Polos Hermanos training videos, where each week Gus comes on and covers a particular topic, and always at one point in each of these little mini training sessions, he drops into true Gus Fring mode just for a second, and then back to the smiley Gus the Polos owner, Chicken Man guy. But they're great. They always are slightly tied to whatever is happening in the show, whether it's employee code of conduct or breakage or these types of things. It's a good thing, and it's pretty awesome. So if you haven't checked those out on the AMC site, do, because they're fantastic. But I think they should be adding the commercials that this film crew does. I agree with you 100%.
And especially now, because they have set up this idea that Jimmy's selling off his commercial time. by not
And
directly selling the commercial space, but selling the production of local commercials
and I
and
think
giving
he's
away the time with it.
yeah, and I think he's a better TV guy than. I mean, he's a good lawyer. He's a smart guy, and he's a good lawyer. He's crafty. He knows all that stuff. But boy, it just seems like his natural calling is this showbiz thing. But you know, in a over the top way. You know, it's not classical stuff, but he's very good at it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why during this scene, when he was talking about off-brand, and then, of course, we get introduced to Saul and his commercials throughout Breaking Bad. So, like, I knew this was one step closer to the character, but I didn't know how close we were going to get.
Yeah, which we will find out very shortly. So they cut away from them. We go over, and Polo's truck is getting unpacked. It's shipping illicit items. Nacho wants 6. He's supposed to get 5. I thought Michael Mondo did a fantastic job in this. You know, the guy comes up, points a gun at him, and doesn't even blink. And so he needs to. They basically end up calling. You know, so Nacho is there to get the stuff for Hector. He wants to get 6 for Hector instead of 5. The other guys call up Gus, who happens to be on a field trip where he's investigating a laundry that is for sale. That looks very familiar to those of us who watched Breaking Bad. And what looks even more familiar is who his writing buddy is. So how surprised were you when that character was revealed?
I was pretty surprised. I knew the laundry right away as soon as they even were showing the close-ups of him and you weren't quite sure where he was. You could just see sort of an industrial type building in the background. I knew that's where we were, and I was excited about that. I didn't necessarily think we were going to meet her right away, but of course we would have to meet her at some point.
Yeah, and it seemed to be, I mean, and she only had like a line.
Right.
But even in the one line, so it's Lydia, for those of you, spoiler alert, by the way, and I assume maybe we should warn people. We're going to talk about everything that happens in these episodes, but I assume they know that.
I was going to say, by this point in the show, like we've dissected every part of the episode, so you've been spoiled already.
Yeah, so awarding at this point would be fruitless. But it's Lydia, and it's to me, a slightly less twitchy Lydia. She seemed almost, kind of normal, which hard to tell from one line, but she, usually, she wasn't wearing the big bug-eyed sunglasses. She wasn't all weirded out. But it was really awesome to see her and Gus together. And so you're starting to see all these dots. Gus to the laundry, Lydia connection. It's all very good stuff.
Yeah, and again, it makes sense. Like, we would be seeing her soon in this timeline. So I didn't necessarily know, when. But it was nice to see her, and obviously we're going to learn a little more about her backstory.
I hope so. I like that actress quite a bit. By the way, she's Scottish. And if you actually ever hear her interviewed, I mean, it's heavy in terms of the accent. So she does an amazing job in kind of suppressing that down for the show, because you wouldn't pick that up in the show. But she's definitely got a very Scottish accent. She's cool, and so neat. It was awesome to see her. So we're getting this nice roll of other characters, and then we finally cut back to Chuck, who's decided to wear sort of a space blanket parka hoodie and go out walking. And I guess Albuquerque's like the Las Vegas of New Mexico, because there's apparently quite a bit of exterior lighting in certain parts of Albuquerque. Because Chuck,
I love all of it. The Las Vegas of New Mexico needs to be their slogan now.
It really should, because it was, and Chuck had to pick the one payphone that was, on the Albuquerque strip of Las Vegas of New Mexico. The strip. He's like in the midst of like all of the Klieg lights is just surrounding this one payphone that Chuck eventually makes his way towards. And calls to Dr. Cove, I believe was his name, but basically called the doctor that we had met when Chuck was in the hospital, who wanted to treat Chuck. And it appears that Chuck has finally come to terms that he does need some help.
Yes, and I thought this whole sequence was going to go one of two ways. That he was either going to try and prove to himself that he can do it and that this is somehow psychologically based, or he was going to go out there and have a complete breakdown and basically be like a homeless person laying under a bridge in his space skirt.
Yeah, I thought it was going to do a little bit worse than it did, too, which would have made me happy. I would have been totally pleased with that.
That's kind of what a part of me definitely thought, like, this is the end of Chuck's character. Like, he just kind of goes insane and wanders off and becomes, somebody living on the streets and no one knows who he is.
And then George Lucas will CGI him into Breaking Bad episodes in the future. We'll see Chuck on the streets.
Breaking Bad, the special edition. How great would it be if they did that and then you went back to watch your Breaking Bad DVDs and there he is in the corner in a space blanket, one shot episode.
Sitting in the court completely wrapped up. and then Jabba the Hutt will be there for some reason. So it'll be nice.
This is so well planned out. It's incredible.
That's right.
I can't wait for them to explain Jabba the Hutt.
That's right. We're giving Vince Gilligan more gold. He should be paying us. We should be on the payroll.
We absolutely should.
So then we cut back. Nacho's reporting back, explained the whole, I told him 6. They were only going to do 5, pointed a gun at my head. Nacho doesn't seem to be getting a lot of props from Hector or his crew around the very good job he's doing. And then Hector starts to go down this road that the Chicken Man and using him for distribution is just a short-term thing. He wants his own. And he's starting to go to Nacho about, how about your dad? Your dad has to get his upholstery from Mexico. Why don't we start to use him as that? And you can just see, again, tremendous acting. The Nacho character is like, look, my dad's a civilian. He's a simple man. He's not a part of any of this stuff. And he desperately does not want to get his dad mixed up into this junk. Because apparently, I think his dad has no idea of Nacho's other involvements. And Hector's pretty indifferent to that. It's like, oh, I'll treat him well and all those types of things. And has a bit of a fit towards the end. And some coughing and takes some pills and drops one of them on the floor that as they all leave, they forgot about, and Nacho had kind of covered it with his foot. So Nacho now has one of Hector's pills, so that will be interesting. This is a writing crew that doesn't waste a lot of energy, so that likely matters. But it's just, so this turn here, Nacho was clearly not happy, and now this run is saying, I'm going to pull your dad into this. I think that's the straw that broke the camel's back, and Nacho's going to have to do something and do it quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And also, too, going back to the previous scene where you were saying about how Nacho keeps his cool when there's a gun pointed at him and everything, do you think that's in part because it doesn't matter, because he knows if he goes back without the 6 that Hector wants, Hector's just going to kill him anyway? Because we start the episode with Hector making Nacho beat up somebody who he was going to let slide.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's awareness of that for sure. I do also think Nacho's just badass.
I completely agree with that. I just wonder how much of it is just like, whatever's going to happen when I go back, if I don't have what he's expecting, is going to be just as bad anyway. So,
yep, I think so. So then we cut back to Jimmy, and he's on the phone talking about don't wear stripes because you'll moray, which I lose one of my, he talked about rule of thirds earlier. Now he's talking about someone's going to shoot a commercial, tell them don't wear stripes because they'll moray, which I love that line. It's going through there. And then he gets back and lets Kim know that he's actually been a busy boy that day and has shot a commercial and it was actually running, and he's kind of enterprisingly set up a process to break even, and Kim wants to see it. And I think I've kind of stepped us through a lot here, Mike. Why don't you take us through the last moments of this episode?
So I was pretty excited to see the commercial because we weren't sure 100% yet if he took the reins himself or had someone fill in for him. I was hoping he took the reins himself, but not as himself. But I wasn't still quite sure yet if we were going to get the big reveal. But he was reluctant, and I think this is important. He was reluctant to show Kim this commercial. Not because he was embarrassed of what he was doing, because what he was doing was clever. And he was bragging about how he might actually break even on this by shooting a commercial for commercials and selling the commercial production packaged with the airtime that he's not allowed to sell on its own. So he was bragging to her about how clever he was with this, but then became shy and reluctant to show her the commercial. And when he shows her the commercial, it's low budget like his other commercials are, and even more rushed. But we start to see some of the more over-the-top production elements, that local commercial feel to it that we're used to seeing. And of course, his slightly disguised character introducing himself for the first time as Saul Goodman.
Saul Goodman, commercial entrepreneur, and you need to be on TV. And I love the commercial because this was a embryonic Better Call Saul commercial. The hand motions, the energy, the delivery, the freneticness on there. Jimmy's wearing a completely ridiculous goatee.
Yeah, I love the goatee because it made me think of, like, you know, he's like the evil side of Jimmy that he's going to become. So like the idea of like the bad Jimmy has a goatee.
Yep. That very, very Star Trek-y in terms of the parallel. Saul Goodman is the evil Jimmy. I think that's a great catch. That was good. What do you think Kim's reaction? So, you know, again, Ray Seahorn is so awesome. She does so much acting without saying a word. And you can tell she's kind of stunned by this commercial, surprised. She's like, wow, that guy's got a lot of energy.
Yeah, well, I thought that was, that's what I was going to point out. She says that guy has a lot of energy. So she immediately makes a separation between Saul Goodman and Jimmy. Like that this is a different person.
Yeah, I think she totally did. You know, I have a hard time gauging what her overall reaction, because I don't think she dislikes it. I think she just really didn't ever expect to see what she saw there.
Right. It was almost like,
but I do think
cautiously looking at something. Like you don't know what to make of it, so you're kind of standing back a little.
Yeah, and I think she respects Jimmy's entrepreneurship to try and solve this problem and just kind of dust himself off and get going. And so it was pretty cool there. And at the very kind of end of it, after she sees it, she's like, wow, he's got a lot of energy. Jimmy shares, yeah, the guy at the station says he's never seen so many star wipes, which is the background for tonight's show. He says, never seen it before, never been done. And there were a lot of star wipes in this commercial.
Which again goes to sort of the over-the-top production look. That's still low-budget local commercial, but insanely over-the-top Saul Goodman stuff that we love. Like, and what I love about the acting on the show, and they're all so good. And what's so great about the acting, and particularly Bob Odenkirk's acting in this, is like you said, it's sort of the embryonic Saul. So he doesn't just jump into full-on Saul. It's like a deconstruction of the character to show this sort of in-between Jimmy and full-on Saul.
Yeah, there's I mean, you certainly wouldn't depict the guy in a commercial as tentative, but you know, on a scale of Saul Goodman in full Better Call Saul mode and this guy, you can just see there's like slight hesitancies here for this guy. He's like only 95% over the top, where Saul's 100%. So did we miss your quote of the show?
No, it was woof.
Oh, woof. That's the quote.
Yeah.
That's a great quote. I love that quote. Excellent. All righty. So we're going to get to see, it looks like from the next series, we're going to start to, there'll be further developments in the whole Mike, Hector, Nacho scheme. And it appears that part of Jimmy's plea agreement is he maybe has to do some community service. because he looked like he was picking up some garbage. So we'll have to see kind of how that all comes out from there. But this was a fun episode. It was great for a show called Better Call Saul to be on the 6th episode of the 3rd season before we really see any indication of Saul Goodman. I mean, we had the Saul Goodman, earlier in kind of a flashback of Jimmy in Chicago, but to really see a walking, operating Saul Goodman in full Star White mode, we got a chance this episode, which was awesome.
Full Star Wipe is an amazing adjective to describe somebody.
So so I hope we see a little bit more of him from there, and I'm sure we will. But we have seen some building blocks here. We've seen the over the top commercial stuff. We've seen Jimmy for the first time starting to just shut down on some things. I'm not going to help Chuck. He's dead to me, and these types of things. So we're slowly now. Will he slowly inch into Saul, or is he going to snap into Saul?
I think he's gonna way more rapidly evolve into Saul, or devolve, depending on your perspective, into Saul from this point forward, because we saw him let go of Chuck. And the only thing I think that's gonna keep any part of Jimmy is Kim at this point. But I think as he starts to do this, maybe in a similar way to what we saw with Walt's character in Breaking Bad, he's going to realize he likes being Saul. And I think he's going to realize it very quickly.
Yeah, it seems like a very natural fit for him. so we'll have to see. We're gonna miss the good side of Jimmy as eventually it all goes away. But
I think that's Jimmy's going to disappear much more rapidly from this point forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the catalyst has to be Kim. To me, something happens there, whether it's she finally kind of says, "Nah, we need to separate," or something worse happens. So we'll have to see. And speaking of something worse happening to Kim, so we've got our Lyle-nometer. So for those of you who have not kind of tuned in, we check on a couple characters. There's Lyle, who's Gus's store manager, who doesn't have a full appreciation of how dangerous a man Hector is. And we have Kim, who's, unfortunately not in the Breaking Bad universe. And so we kind of wonder what happens to her. And we kind of keep track on what we think their relative chance of survival is. So we've kept Lyle at a solid 95 since his appearance. We haven't had any action to kind of see whether that's going to change or not. I think they kind of reinforced that Hector's a horrible, horrible person. So
I think not only reinforced it, but they're ratcheting up the tension now between Gus and Hector, which for me kicks Lyle up a notch. Like he's like a 96 or a 97 now.
I'm very comfortable with putting Lyle at 97% chance of us not seeing him for much longer.
Yeah, I think basically the next time we see him will be the last time we see him.
Yeah, there's going to be a mistake made and consequences. So 97. So Kim.
What did we have her at last week?
So I believe our Kimometer, gosh, and I'd have to go back, but I believe we're around 65 for her.
I'm going to jump way up to a 75 for me personally, and the reason is because Saul is here now. Even if he's not in full-on Saul mode, we have officially met Saul. So this is the beginning of the end, so to speak. And we know that Kim's not in the Breaking Bad universe. And whatever I think that Jimmy's going to evolve very quickly into Saul, and the only thing that's going to hold him back over the next season or a few episodes or however long that transformation takes, the only thing that's going to hold him back is his connection to Kim. And obviously he loses that connection at some point. So I feel like this is the beginning of the end. Like the roller coaster has been slowly clicking upwards, and she's at that tipping point now. So I'm going to say 75.
I think I'm going to stay at 65, mostly because something happens to Kim. She is out of the picture at some point in time,
Right.
and it's either because she decides to take herself out of the picture and moves out of it that way, or something bad happens to take her out of the picture, which would be your 75%. I'm continuing, some of the groundwork has been laid for at some point Kim to kind of go, you're not exactly who you were when I became romantically connected to you, and I'm getting out of this thing because it just needs to. So I'm going to stay with 65, but I don't think the first emergence of Saul is good news for Kim. I would agree. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. So
Yeah, I'm using the first appearance of Saul as my justification for kicking it up 10 points there, because this to me is the countdown. It's the start of the official countdown for Kim, because I don't think she survives it. But I will say, if it is a situation where it's her decision to leave Jimmy Saul's life, then I want a Kim show so badly.
That would be pretty awesome.
Just such a great character. She's such an amazing actress, and her portrayal of this character, I would want that show. And it doesn't even have to connect back to the Breaking Bad universe. Like, I just want to see what they do. Like, she could be far off on the other side of the country, and I still think that would make an interesting show.
Yeah, and maybe she changes careers, and instead of being a lawyer, she decides to become a video producer, and her crew is Jimmy's old crew, and they all move to New York, and hilarity ensues. All righty, good deal. Fun episode. This is one of the best, I think, of the ones so far this season, of the entire series. Always enjoying it. It's great. We'll be back next week, 9-ish, 10-ish Eastern time, to talk about episode 7, and would like to thank everybody for listening.
Thank you, guys.